Hi, and thanks for joining. Today I'm going to go through what you need to do to make your application a multi-tenant application, supporting SaaS using InverCloud. What we'll do is look at the standard application architecture for your existing application, for example, and we'll see what needs to happen to make that architecture multi-tenant capable. So, if you look at this architecture, your application may not look exactly like this. It may not be as explicitly broken out as we show here, but it's important when you're doing your transition to multi-tenancy, you must look at each of these three building blocks and see what needs to happen in each one to make your application multi-tenant. So this application has got a presentation layer, business logic and data layer, and it's sitting on top of a typical application database that is designed for use by a single tenant. In addition to that, you've got the rest of the user management functionality. It may be more integrated or more tied in with the rest of your application than what I'm showing here, but you will have things like user creation, user sign-in, changing passwords, etc. And to manage that, you'll have some user screens and you'll have your application logic and your database sitting behind that interface. Now, the tables for user management are obviously part of your user management database, even if they are not co-located with or part of the application database as you see them right now. So let's have a look at this architecture and see what will need to happen to move to multi-tenancy. You need to think of what features are unique to multi-tenancy. For example, you'll want to handle new customers, and by that I mean new organizations who themselves may have multiple users. So those new customers must be able to sign up, possibly through self-service sign up, to access your application. That's probably functionality you're going to have to create from scratch. You may or may not want the concept of self-service sign up for individual users, but you'll certainly going to want that for your tenants. If you look at the user management piece, you will possibly have roles and groups defined, but now they will all have to become multi-tenant aware. What's really important in the move to multi-tenancy is you will not want to make significant changes to your application logic. This is what defines your success as a software vendor. It's how your application actually works. So the ideal scenario would be if you could make the move to multi-tenancy while making the minimum changes to your application logic. And I'm happy to tell you that that is possible using InverCloud. So with InverCloud, the first thing we look at is to see if your database has the concept of separate organizations existing within your database structure. If not, it means your application doesn't have the concept of multi-tenancy. So you're going to have to adapt your application database to become multi-tenant aware. To do this, we use a part of our product which is called the InverCloud Database Wizard. And what this does is sucks in your database, creates a model of that database, and then transforms that database to add all of the functionality that's required to become multi-tenant aware. And we create a multi-tenant version of your application schema. So when you've got that in place, you then need to repoint your application to the new multi-tenant app database. And you do that by making connection string changes, pretty minor changes, at the data access layer of your application. Now, of course, because you haven't changed your application or your access layer in any significant way, the new application database needs to understand what to do with the old SQL requests and has to transform them in a way that makes sense to the multi-tenant application database that we've created. Because we're the ones who has made that transformation, we also know what to do at runtime, how to interpret those SQL requests so that it makes sense to the new application database. The next major step you're going to have to do is look at your user management system. There's a lot of additional user management functionality required that is unique to multi-tenancy, meaning that you'll need to drop your user management system as it stands and replace it with functionality that gives you the multi-tenancy capabilities. If you have the standard .NET membership provider right now, for example, you'll need to replace that functionality by instead connecting to something like the InverCloud Multitenant Manager. Despite the name, the InverCloud Multitenant Manager does a lot more than just the user management piece. Let's have a look and see some of the building blocks that are in there to allow you to move to multi-tenancy. The first one is role and group management. Now, you may have some role functionality and group functionality at the core of your existing application, and you may decide to leave some or all of that functionality within your application. But what the multi-tenant management for InverCloud solution gives you is an extensive template, an organization template of how roles and groups are organized. And you can decide to use that for all your roles and groups, or you may decide to have a mixture of your existing application logic supplemented by the multi-tenancy role and logic. You've got that flexibility. Secondly, when considering multi-tenancy, you're going to have to use the new multi-tenant aware role management solution. I talked earlier about self-service sign-up. So all of the functionality, the user screens, the backend database and the logic are all in here to allow you to plumb in self-service sign-up to your application. You just need to add a button to your existing app screen, and after that everything else happens in the multi-tenant manager. Next, on the top right we've got authentication. And your existing application may well have the concept of forms of authentication. You first of all need to revise that approach. What's different about multi-tenant and SaaS applications generally is because users are now up in the cloud, they're not single sign-in Active Directory, or they're not part of a single resource pool in your organization. So customers of SaaS applications will place an immediate requirement on you to support federated authentication. And this is a key part of the transition to the cloud. Your SaaS customers will ask if they can manage all their users in one single location. It may be Active Directory FS, or it may be using Facebook IDs, it may be Salesforce, Google IDs, but that is functionality that you'll require in the medium term, if not the short term. So this is available out of the box. We've got full SAML2 compliant connections and have implemented this Facebook, Salesforce, Google ID, Active Directory FS out of the box. Associated with federated authentication and authentication in the cloud generally is that if a new customer signs up, they're going to want to find a way of transitioning all of their users in one go into the new application. This is bulk provisioning, and it's obviously very important functionality. That's also available out of the box with the InverCloud Multi-Tenant Manager. When you think of SaaS applications, because you're sharing resources, it's very important to have clear visibility on how those resources are being used, right down to the detailed resource utilization data. What's your space? What remaining space is available to you? How are you going to plan your scaling and add new tenants? And what are the physical hardware or software assets that you may require to support further growth? InverCloud has got extensive resource usage dashboarding to address that challenge. Another challenge is that individual features on SaaS applications may be tied to subscriptions or to individual roles or groups that you've got. So you need the ability to attach the individual resources to subscription types. And again, this is functionality that comes with InverCloud Multi-Tenant Manager out of the box. On the bottom left is an area that's extremely important and becoming more so for all applications, not just for multi-tenant apps. And that's the area of logging and auditing access to systems. Many of us now have Sarbanes-Oxley type requirements where we have to show what users have accessed the systems, what their permissions were, if they had any administrative privileges, and what they're capable of seeing in the database. So this is functionality that you may well need to add to your application even if you never move to multi-tenancy. But it is an especially key requirement for SaaS applications, as there's so much possibility for access to data in the cloud. So this is a very important building block that you get when you move to a solution like the InverCloud Multi-Tenant Manager. So looking at the big picture, software as a service as a business model rather than a technology may not suit all applications or all companies, but I suspect that you're now thinking that at some point in the future you're going to have an offering that is software as a service. It may be an offering only for a certain type of customer you're targeting, and that can represent a real challenge because you can't abandon your existing customer base, and the investment that's required to take your existing application and completely rebuild it from the ground up to becoming a SaaS application is significant. So what InverCloud allows you to do is to use that platform to quickly and with low upfront costs create a multi-tenant version of your application. It gives you a low-cost way of dipping your toe into the world of SaaS to see if the SaaS model works for you. And in that way, the InverCloud license structure means that you only start paying based on the number of tenants you've deployed. So you start incurring investment costs once you're successful with your SaaS deployment. Once you're making revenues from SaaS and your customers are getting value, that's when you start to pay for InverCloud. So, thank you for your time. There are many more features built into InverCloud. We'd be delighted to talk with you about them and what we can offer. If you're interested in what you've seen here, please feel free to contact us. If you'd like to become a customer, we're more than happy to talk to you. Or you can send an email to the address shown here, info@invercloud.com. Thanks again. Bye for now.